Good evening. This is the November 21st, 2016 meeting of the Wallingford Zoning Board of Appeals. Before we open the meeting, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first thing I want to announce is that anyone that's here for hearing number 1633, a special exception request from Educational Play Care to increase enrollment capacity from 184 to 219 at Child Daycare Center, 15 North Plains Industrial Road. That hearing will not be held tonight. So if anyone's here to talk for it, against it, or whatever, it won't be held tonight. But the first hearing that will be for tonight is hearing 1632 for Cangle for 20 parking spaces where 26 are required and 20 spaces exist to accommodate additional patio seating at 765 North Colony Road.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, we have the pre-meeting announcement.
Before we start tonight's meeting, I'd like to announce that tonight's decisions will be published in the Record Journal on Friday, November 25th, 2016. The effective date of your variance will be Friday, November 25th, 2016. The date a certified copy is recorded on the land records. The statutory 15-day appeal period will expire on Sunday, December 11th, 2016. You commence operations and/or construction during the appeal period, you do so at your own risk. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Would you identify yourselves for the record and tell us what your application is all about?
Good evening. My name is John Torello. I am an architect and planner, having an office in Cheshire, Connecticut, Torello Associates Architects and Planners. With me, I have representatives from the Rick's Place in Wallingford, on Route 5, Rick's on 5, I guess it's called. And I'm here to represent them for this application. If you have any questions, they'll be happy to answer, and they will identify themselves at that time if you do. I do have some additional photographs that I will pass out to you if you'd like.
share.
If you'd like, I'll explain what those are. The application before you this evening is to recognize an existing nonconformity. While the application implies that there is going to be additional seating, the seating that caused the nonconformity in parking has been there. We've determined at least to 2011 from those photographs, which we got off of Google, and were able to ascertain the date from the supplier, and as well as testimony from the employees of the former owner, not these gentlemen, but the former owners, that said that the seating outside the building in the form of the benches that you'll see in that picture, if you look carefully you could see them, has been there since at least 2005. My clients bought the premises under the assumption that this was an allowed use, and since the parking is pretty much contained on the site and there's really no more room to add additional parking, the question is, where do we go when someone bought something in good faith and is now told that that there is a violation, in fact. I do believe that the recognition of the existing nonconformity is the basis of this application, and we're asking that it serve as a memorializing, if you want to call it that, the existing conditions, so it's on the record and doesn't exist in the clouds somewhere. The hardship obviously is due to the land at this point and the existing conditions that have been there prior to my clients purchasing the business. As you probably all know, it's a very successful and popular diner, and I've been there many times to observe how the operation works. And it seems that, and it may sound self-serving to say this, but every time we've been there, we were able to get a parking space at lunch hour time. So it appears that we're just about at where the parking requirement exists. There doesn't seem to be any problems with parking on Route 5, obviously. I think that would be extremely dangerous, and agree that should not occur. But the hardship due to the land here is based on the fact that this is a corner property. Not only is it a corner property, it is a double corner property. It has frontage on 3 streets, basically, one being Route 5 and the 2 side streets, as you can see on your map. So we believe that the hardship does exist, and there is little way to increase the parking. As you can see, some of the parking is actually in Route 5, in the right-of-way of Route 5, and it has existed for a long time. As a planner and architect, I've been in the business for 52 years now, and I've done several restaurants and diners and pizzerias and things of that nature. And I can tell you that one of the most popular things right now is outdoor dining. And it serves a couple of purposes. In good weather, It provides an opportunity for people to eat on the run without having to take a takeout and try to eat it in the car or something like that, or find another place to go. And it frees up the space on the inside. The second reason that we see that people get involved with the outdoor dining experience is that, frankly, it's good advertising. It becomes a signal to the passing population that it is a friendly place to come and eat, and you can see it at every level, from the fast food restaurants to some of the better restaurants that are doing that. It really is ubiquitous today, and one of the problems we find is that parking is normally related to 3 or 4 different ways of computing the requirement, and it varies from town to town, and it's very difficult to determine what's the best way to do it. Some of them do it on terms of gross floor area, some do it on the net dining area, some do it on the number of seats, some do it on the number of tables. In this particular case, the building is relatively small, and if you were to take the building code requirement for seating, you would say that the existing conditions are pretty tight. The tables are very close together. It is not a very comfortable situation overall, other than the fact that everyone gets to be very friendly with one another because of the close contact. So that in this particular case, the square footage requirements would require 25 spaces, including the outdoor seating. I think that if you were to do a more accurate calculation based on the building code requirements for tables and chairs, for instance, you would find that that number might be reduced, because the area required is usually 15 square feet per occupant for tables and chairs, and that's well above what is actually in the field today. So there is a hardship here. They cannot expand the building to make it more comfortable. They can't expand the parking to make it more accommodating. But I think the existing conditions are right about where the restaurant will perform at its optimum level without providing any deleterious effects on the community. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I have a question for you. This, the picture here that shows the seating area, is that the non-conformity at this time?
Okay, what you're looking at, see, I don't call that the non-conformity. The non-conformity is the parking, because the seating has existed. In your black and white photos, you will see that those go back at least to 2011, and between 2011 and now, showing that there was seating out there in that location. The difference is in the color photo that you have, the large color photo, they've replaced the picnic benches with tables and chairs, and they've actually reduced the number of seats as a result of that. So it really is a reduction in a nonconformity if you want to look at it that way.
So the seating is what is causing the nonconformity?
The seating caused the nonconformity way back when, and it has never been properly adjudicated with the town, but it's been that way for many, many years, at least till 2005, and some people have told me it goes beyond that. I can't confirm that, but we know that the Google pictures that you see, the black and whites, those go to at least 2011. We've identified, my engineer design development group is a
I know on occasion on Saturday morning, and I drive by there, they must do an awful good business on Saturday morning, because I've seen vehicles parked on Route 5, trying to off of the travel portion of the road, but on Route 5 nevertheless. And that's with the parking that exists there now. And you want to have 6 less parking spaces?
We're not asking for anything less than what is there. That's what we're saying.
So what's there now, in other words, what's there now is 6 under what is required for the capacity of the building?
That's correct. Actually, it's 5. We did a recalculation, and the area of the patio dining is actually 375 square feet, so it comes out to 25 rather than 26. But it's I think that's, you know, it's kind of splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah.
Because since the existing ones are the ones that are there, and you can't do anything about them to go any farther.
Well, you know, even the way it exists now, on times that I've seen the overflow, it's definitely causing a traffic hazard, possible traffic hazard, in the back as well. But of course, the back is a very lightly traveled road.
Yes,
but
yes.
Route 5 is another story. Any other
Bernie?
commissioners have a?
Bernie?
Yes, sir.
I mean, if I can talk a little bit, so my name is Ty.
Excuse me, sir, can you identify yourself?
That's what I'm gonna do now. So,
Okay, and your address as well, too.
Yep, no
Thank you.
My name is Stefan, and I'm living 137 Charlie Crossing Lane, Middletown, and I'm the part owner, the Ricks. So
You speak a little closer to the microphone, please.
No problem. So my partner's been there like year, and I've been there 2 months, and the parking space is tight, as you can see, but some of the cars is like, the auto dealers right next to us. It seems like we are busy, but some of the parking cars is there for the auto park cars, you know, they park in there. It looks like we are busy or packed in or blocking the way. As I said, those tables have been there like since 2005. We didn't do anything special. We just fixed it a little bit. It was dirt. It was picnic tables were there, so we didn't expand anything. So we just put the new new tables, and it looks better now. So I mean, like, it doesn't affect anybody. It used to be sitting there. I'm not sure if they were, but the people waiting outside, you know, for the seating, now they will be able to sit at least on the tables, and they can come in. I mean, we're not asking for too much. I mean, it was there, so we didn't do anything special. It was dirt, it was cracked. We just fixed it.
Well, I agree with you that these tables look better than the picnic tables, but that doesn't help your situation any.
That's true, but as I said, I mean, like, we are not going to be able to sit anybody else over there. Our seat is, I mean, if it's full, it's full. You know, nobody else is going to be sitting or parking anywhere else and come there.
Yeah, my problem is, if it's full, it's good for you, but
Thank you.
they're parking illegally on Route 5, not all the time, but occasionally, and I've seen it. I was on the police department here for 50 years, and or 48 years,
Okay.
and I've seen that problem there. We never bothered the owner because it was, you know, he's doing business, and someone must have approved it. It was never questioned. But now, when did this non-conformity, when was it brought to your attention?
I think they did it last year, so I believe they did it last year. I'm not sure. So I've been there 2 months, so they did it last year. They fixed everything. So it used to be like, is a dirt and the cracks, you know, the cements on the floor. So they just fixed the cements and the tables. That's all they did, basically.
Do you have any idea when it was?
In May of this year,
Yeah.
it was brought to the Planning and Zoning Office attention, to my attention as a zoning
Okay.
enforcement
Yeah.
officer, that there was outdoor dining occurring at the property. The owners have certainly put in quite a bit of aesthetic improvements to the property, and those picnic benches and the patio did exist. However, they are now serving and increasing their capacity as a result, and this is why they are here, to rectify that violation.
Was that owner given a cease and desist?
No, he was not, just a violation, and they came immediately in and proceeded with their variance application, as you see it forward in front of you today.
And was that issued to the present owner or the?
The owner present with us today, correct?
Okay, so the other owner just went ahead and did it and?
Correct, there was never approvals for the expansion of use, and it remains to be seen whether or not that was actually seating in terms of restaurant service, or, as he just mentioned himself, waiting for tables and indoors.
Yes, yes. Any other commissioners have any comments?
Yes.
Mr. Rice, yes.
My question is to the planner. In calculating the parking spaces required, what calculation to use, just for his property?
The zoning regulations for the town of Wallingford use a gross floor allowance, which does include the kitchen facilities and such for the seating capacity at 75, for one parking space per 75 feet of gross floor allowance. So that this is where the calculation is, as he's just amended with the addition or the decreased patio space, the requirement based on that 75, one space per 75 feet would require them to have 25 spaces.
So the parking that's available, because I don't believe there's any parking signs that say no parking on Old Colony Road, that parking that's available there is not counted into the...
That's not his parking. This parking lot consists of 20 parking
But it is
spaces.
public parking and can be used. Yes,
That's a public street. Well,
exactly. So
He
there's
cannot
probably
include
8
that in
more
his
parking
parking.
spots behind there on Old Colony. And I don't know about Beaumont Avenue, but they do park there too.
that's not included in his parking calculation. He's required to provide on-site parking, one space per 75 feet. So
this-
whether or not there is,
And we allow this in town too, right?
I'm sorry?
In our calculations for other restaurants
We are looking
in
strictly
town,
at the lot, unless there's
we didn't
shared
take into
space.
consideration the parking in the back parking lot or on the street.
If it's their parking lot, yes, we do take it into consideration. We do not take into consideration any on-street parking. We're strictly speaking off-street parking that they must provide.
So there's basically an exception for in-town versus somebody who's out of town. Out of the city limits.
So we're speaking the zoning regarding Route 5 and this particular business and this particular site. And that's the requirement that the
Because the
zoning
way I
has
look-
applied.
The way I look at it a different perspective. I know they're packed. I go by there on Sunday and I know they're packed. But I also see them parking behind and on Beaumont Avenue. And because there's nothing that says they can't park there, I assume that they have plenty of parking. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I just had a quick question for you. Given the schematic that we're looking at, it looks like, and I've been to the site many times, there is some green space on sort of the Beaumont Avenue side and just a little bit on the Route 5 side. Is there any way to rearrange this parking so that you can eke out a couple additional spaces?
We've looked at that and it's just not possible. As you can see, some of the spaces on the Route 5 side are actually in the right-of-way. Red line is the right-of-way line for Route 5 at State. Now, I will say that this is fairly common now. I've run into this several times, even with the Hawthorne Inn. We did work on them several years ago. Virtually all of their front yard parking was in the right-of-way. And what we did is we met with the state, and the state said, we're not going to widen that any longer. I mean, once I-91 came in, there was no, when they initially took the right-of-way, they were presuming it was going to turn into a superhighway at some point, and they see, by virtue of the traffic, they don't need it anymore, so it was allowed. I mean, this is one of those things that's been there all this time. I don't know if there's any rights of way that were granted. I doubt it very much. In the old days, it just was done and everyone just dealt with it. And by and large, most of the owners, before we got into the kinds of sophisticated surveys we're doing today, presumed that that was their land all the way up to the curb line, you know. And it happens everywhere. And I will say that in answer to Mr. Reese there, the regulation is what it is, and we totally agree with the planner that legally you have to go by that. But the zones do change as you go from an inner city situation where there is virtually 100% occupation of a building and public parking in places that are on a highway. So it's understandable that there is a concern there, and I think that's something that the owners would have to take into consideration. Recently, in the New Haven situation, which was even more severe than this, on Middletown Avenue, a fast food outlet came on board, and one of the requirements they had was to have someone there on the busiest times to help people park, actually, so they don't violate the law. And that, that might be a consideration here, to make sure that when it starts to get, pretty hectic, someone's there to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think that would be the kind of condition that we'd be happy to be concerned with. But given the fact that it's an existing condition, I mean, it has existed, and law says that once it's been there, it's an existing nonconformity. It can't be expanded, but it should be reduced. And the reduction here really is in getting it on the record as existing and being continued. I think that's a fundamental law of nonconformities, that it's allowed to exist as long as it doesn't change use. And this is a continuation of the same use, and that seating was there. So it's a recognition of the fact that something was needed at some point in time to dedicate that outdoor dining as part of the seating. And in your case, you don't make a distinction between outdoor seating and indoor seating. In many other municipalities, what they will do is they will give you a free ticket for a certain percentage. For instance, we just did one in West Haven where an outdoor dining patio was given the right to use the existing parking as long as the outdoor dining was less than 25% of the total seating capacity. So there are some differences in different municipalities. And I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I just want to give you an example of how it's handled elsewhere.
I think our Planning and Zoning Commission is, at this time, looking into changing the parking regulations to be a little more lenient. But I have the feeling that even if we eliminated this seating, there'd still be the same problem there, because I've seen the problem there in the winter as well as during the warm weather. So I don't think that the problem that I see has anything to do with this seating. It's maybe just a little worse when there's in this warm weather when people are able to sit there. And quite frankly, I think that you should write a letter to the police department and have them look at that situation and perhaps put no parking signs there. And then the department would have some sort of enforcement measure in the event that there was an overflow there. Anything else? Do you have anything else?
Mr. Chair. Ms. Torrey, do you have any record of any kind of a variance that has been granted previously with regard to the previous outdoor seating arrangement?
For this particular parcel, we have 0 records. We have never received a site plan.
Okay.
And it was built post-zoning.
Okay. So the bind that we're in is, I understand that there's new ownership now and that they relied on what existed at the time they purchased. But we're in a really difficult spot because the previous owners expanded without apparently going through any of the proper channels and coming to us and asking before they did anything if this was something that was possible, given the parking constraints. And so, you know, when we are asked to give a variance sort of retroactively in this kind of a situation, it's tough because it sort of sends a signal to other folks that they can sort of do whatever they'd like and then come back a few years later and see if they can get away with it. And that's a problem.
I agree with you in principle, but I think zoning law covers this. And the fact that we're here for a variance, if it were my advice, I would say that we shouldn't be here because of the fact that it exists, and zoning law, if you check with your legal counsel, I think they will agree with that. Nonconformities, if they've been existing for a certain period of time, they're allowed to remain unless you change the use. And that is a use from, not ownership. Ownership doesn't count as change of use. And I think most zoning ordinances have that written into their regulations. So what we're doing, I think, is to provide a record that has never been done at this point. And I think that's the only way we can do that without going through the legal process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to, I think, dovetail a little bit with what Mr. Desjardins was discussing. The problem for us, at least, is that our zoning ordinances, they define non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures as either uses or structures that existed before the regulations came into effect. And our regulations came into effect, I believe, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in 1958. Okay, so the use of this outdoor seating or the structure, the patio, you would have to be presenting us with evidence to show that that patio or that use existed before 1958 for it to qualify as a non-conforming use or structure. And I don't see anything here tonight that would establish that. I think what we have heard is that the patio or the use existed as far back as 2011, but we would have to see something that would go back to 1958 or before 1958. That's sort of, I think, the issue that, now I'm not voting tonight, but I think that's probably, you know, one of the issues that people up here may be having in their heads. The only other thing that I wanted to ask you about was that, you know, I looked at this diagram, and again, this may be splitting hairs, but I see 19 spaces, and I don't see 20 spaces unless we're counting, there's one space that's at the very corner, and I don't know if you're counting that as a space or not. At the back, the back corner, at the corner of Beaumont and Old Colony Road. Are you counting that as a space?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Squeeze in there because everyone uses it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Tanner?
More of a comment, not so much a question. I'm kind of trying to look at this more as a practical matter, and I honestly don't think that whether they have the seating on the patio or not, that it's really going to change much of the parking. They get a line there on Saturdays and Sundays, and so the people are going to be parked to be waiting in line, or they're going to be parked potentially sitting on the patio. So I really don't see that this is going to make a huge dent in the parking, whether they have these additional spaces or not. And also because there is parking on Old Colony Road, which is a pretty lightly traveled road, and Beaumont Avenue, maybe a little more so. I think there's definitely enough room there to cover the 5 spaces that they're short.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for the applicants? Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of this application?
Yeah, my name is Ralph, Ralph Mesite, 390 North Main. I've been going there since the mid-2000s, and actually we dined outside on the wooden tables, and we stopped doing that because it was starting to get dilapidated. And I think in May or whenever the compliance came in, they noticed it because they cleaned it up, is basically what they did. They made it look presentable, and then people drove by and go, oh my God, there's people outside. And there were definitely people out there. And my background's restaurants, of course. In the outside dining, if you notice a lot of these restaurants, there's more people outside than inside. If a party of two comes in for lunch, they're going to prefer probably to sit outdoors than inside. So it's going to be a balance, I think. You know, yeah, great on a Sunday or Saturday, you may be totally full, but what are we talking? 15 seats, 5 parking spaces? In my opinion, if someone's not going to find parking, they're going to leave, and it's only going to be a problem on their end, not on the customer's end. And you know, Rick's been there for forever. It's like an icon. I know people ask directions. Oh, you go past Rick's and so on, but I think it's such a minor thing, in my opinion, from the restaurant business. If he had, you know, 40, 50 more seats, yeah, I would say that's an issue, because parking in this town is around. But zoning, if memory serves me right, it's the same zoning throughout the entire town, whether it's downtown or it's on Route 5. I mean, there's so many variances that go on downtown versus, you know, like his place as an example. And I just think he really just cleaned it up is all he did. Like I said, we ate there and there was not a problem. But coming from, again, I think it's 5 spaces we're talking about. And like you were saying, they have the parking on the street, which is fine. I mean, you know, I hate for them to start closing down that street for these guys, because they'll go out of business easily. But also, if you noticed, if you ever dine there, people are in and out so fast. I mean, when we go there, I think I maybe have a half a cup of coffee and my food's on the table. And then it just thing turns so quick. And I mean, my opinion, I'm in favor of them having this, because it was, I understand it was pre-existing, but it wasn't in compliance. But it looks so much nicer. And when you drive by on Route 5, it really pops. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak in favor of the application? Does anyone in the audience wish to speak against the application? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and open it to the commission for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve this application for better use of the property without changing the character of the neighborhood.
Second.
I'd like to make an amendment to that motion.
Okay.
I would like the planning officer to contact the police department and have them check down there on occasion, and when they deem it necessary, to have the traffic commission put no parking signs if it is necessary.
In what area is this? On Route 5 specifically?
Route 5, and I noticed that some people do park on Beaumont Avenue closer to, makes it tough to get out onto Route 5 if you're crossing.
I accept that. Need a second.
There, a second to the motion.
Second.
I have a question on the motion. Do we have to wait for the PD to come back?
No, I think we leave it up to the police department to see if they think there's a problem there, then they'll take care of it.
Thank you.
But this is just that we're going to request that they check into it.
Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
Yes, to approve.
Are we voting on the motion or the amendment?
Or we're not?
The whole thing.
Oh, I thought we have.
The second was for the amendment and the motion.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Chairman Bernie.
Yes,
Motion approved.
you're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next hearing is,
34.
No, that's next month.
Oh, 34.
7 Carr Street.
1634, variance request from Russell at 7 Carr Street.
This application is for front yard of 22 feet where 30 feet exists and 40 feet is required to construct an addition. Applicant seeks variance to construct a mudroom and porch addition in an R18 district.
Say your name and explain your application.
Good evening, my name is John Russell. I'm a homeowner of 7 Carr Street in Wallingford. This is my wife, Catherine. We're both the homeowners. The purpose of the application is to construct a mudroom on the front of the house. I understand there's a 40-foot variance to the curb rule, which is, I guess has never existed. Since the house was built in 1956, it's been 36 feet to the foundation wall from the curb, so no matter what, I'm kind of stuck within that 40 feet. What this would add would be a mudroom or foyer in the front and a covered front porch along the side of it, changing the direction of the front door from facing the street to facing the driveway. It allows for better access to the house, seeing that I now have 4 kids who like to track mud, rock salt, snow, and stuff like that into the house. It'll stop me from destroying hardwood floors. The hardship established here is there's really no other place in the house that I could do this without reconfiguring the entire interior of the house. That's pretty much it.
And the entrance to this mudroom is going to be on the left side of the house?
We'll be in the same location as where the front door is, as you see it, only facing left as you're looking at the house, sir.
Any questions from the commission? Anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wish to speak against the application? Seeing none, I close the public hearing and open it to the commission for
Mr. Chairman,
discussions. Yes.
I make a motion to approve the application, better use of the property without altering the character of the neighborhood.
Second.
Motion to approve, Mr. Desjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek,
Yes.
Mr. Rice,
Yes.
Mr. Bernie.
Yes. You're all set.
Thank you.
Next application is
Very interesting.
1635, a variance request from Laterno, 93 and 97 Northfield Road.
This application is to recognize 93 and 97 Northfield Road as 2 distinct unmerged lots rather than one single merged lot in an R18 district.
You introduce yourself, please, and explain the application.
Yes, good evening. For the record, my name is Joan Malloy. I'm an attorney with the firm of Laughlin Fitzgerald. My office is located at 150 South Main Street here in Wallingford, Connecticut. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. Sitting to my right is David Laterno, one of the applicants. Mr. Chairman, before I start my presentation, I do have some copies of some things that I would like to give to the board. May I do so? If I may, Mr. Chairman, the Letourneau's, the property in question was originally part of a large, about 21-acre parcel owned by Louis Tanch, and it was located off Northfield Road. And in the 1940s, he began to subdivide his property and convey lots to his children. My client was able to get from the engineering department a works progress map from 1954. And in the packet that I gave you is sort of a reduced portion of that map that shows the various lots that were being created. And I've highlighted two lots, Lewis and Elmer, because that's going to become important in a few moments as I explain something. And then there's the lot that's owned by Helen and Louis Tanch Jr. During the 1960s, the state of Connecticut took by way of condemnation a large portion of the rear of these lots. It may be difficult to read, but they were basically 700 feet deep. And then when the Wharton Brook connector came in, they basically took I'd say approximately 400 plus feet of all those lots in order to create. And I did include in the packet that I gave you just the assessor's map that showed these lots, just in case you're not familiar with. It's hard to believe, but it is possible you might not understand the extent of the property that was taken. And it wasn't just from this family, but from other families as well to create that. So that made the lots smaller. In fact, one of the consequences of the state condemning that property is the state had to go in and get an area variance for 93 Northfield Road because they took so much of their property, they were less than the required minimum. And that variance is referenced in the application that we submitted tonight. Now, in addition to taking the rear of all those lots, the state of Connecticut actually took all of the lots that were the entire lot owned by Elmer and Lewis. So that's why I highlighted that on the 54 map, so that they actually had an access out to Northfield Road. And then in 1967, the state conveyed back what they didn't need, and they conveyed it to Mr. Tanch. And I gave you the copy of the map of the property that was conveyed back from the state of Connecticut in 1967. And that was basically, you can see about, it ranged from 250 feet to 275 feet in length. Again, these were angled lots, so the side yards are, the east-west property lines vary a little bit, but it was basically 120 feet wide. So in 1967, some of this property comes back. In the early 1990s, Mr. Letourneau's extended family began working with the various town departments, including Linda Bush and the assessor's office, to correct certain errors in terms of ownership of who owned what lots and what were the dimensions of those lots. Then in 1995, a survey of the property of 93 and 97 Northfield Road was performed. And that survey map was actually attached to the actual application. And that was a map from 1995. And in 1995, there was a strip of land approximately 18 feet in width that was taken from this property that came from the state of Connecticut and added to 93 because 93 was non-conforming as to the width of the lot. Because when the zoning regulations came in, they said you're supposed to have a 100-foot lot, and because this lot had existed with only 60 feet, it was non-conforming. So they did everything they could to make it more conforming, added this approximate 18 feet to increase the lot width of 93. But they maintained 100 feet for 97. And I gave you a copy of the deed that was executed at that particular point in time to show you that conveyance of that strip. And if you look, and I believe I highlighted, or I had highlighted on the deed, the reference to say that the purpose of this conveyance was not to merge the lots, that their intent was to keep those as separate lots. So clearly the goal or the rationale for the conveyance was to try and make 93 as conforming as possible, while still maintaining a legal lot for 97. I also provided you copies of the assessor's cards showing that 93 and 97 have been treated by the town as separate lots. They have been taxed as separate lots. The family has always treated them as separate lots, one of which already has a house on it and one in which the applicants hope to build a home. Unfortunately, as they approached the process of looking at whether they could do the building, the issue of merger came into place. Now, under the Wallingford regulations, merger is presumed if you have a non-conforming lot next to a conforming lot, or two non-conforming lots. They want you to bring them together. And we can't overcome that presumption without coming to this board. Now, despite the fact that the zoning regulations say we presume merger, the state law, Connecticut General 8-2, specifically says that you have to look at the intent of the property owner. Did the property owner intend to merge? And the mere fact that they never built on the lot prior to the adoption of zoning does not mean they've lost their right to treat that as a separate building lot. But again, you're the only board that can make that determination. The zoning department can't do that because of the wording that's in the regulations of the presumptions. So we're here tonight to try and show you that these are lots, in some cases, that were created prior to the existence of zoning, that the way they ended up now came about as a result of condemnation performed by the state of Connecticut in order to expand Wharton Brook, that the family has done everything it can to make both lots as conforming as possible. One is conforming as to size and area, and the other one they've tried to increase as best that they can. We're asking you to please grant the application and to recognize these as two separate lots has been the intention of the family ever since they were created. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I hope by bouncing around in maps didn't confuse you, but I thought it was important to give you that history.
Anyone have any questions of the applicant? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Attorney Malloy. I just had a couple questions. I appreciate the history because when I was looking through this, I had no idea why you were coming before us. So I appreciate that, and I think I understand that a little bit better now. I just have at least a couple questions right now. I may have more as other people ask, but is it your position then that the presumption provision in our regulations violates the Connecticut statutes?
No, I don't think it violates the statute. I think it says the burden is on the person who's arguing that the lots have not merged to provide some evidence that there was whatever you're arguing existed, did in fact exist, and that you didn't abandon it or give up your intent to use it. And that's the reason for the history of trying to establish this was clearly an intent that's been in existence since the 1940s, is to have two separate building lots in these particular. What happened to the shape and size of them changed because of what the state of Connecticut did, but they were separate parcels and should continue to be treated as separate parcels.
Okay. And I appreciate that. I was just quickly looking over the deed from 1995, and there's some reference to an easement interest. Can you explain what that is?
If you look at the map that was referenced and it was attached to the application, there is actually a driveway easement. A portion of the driveway for the existing home is on 197, and there was an agreement that they would not make them remove it at that particular point in time, so they granted them an easement so that it was allowed to remain. So that's what it is, to maintain an existing condition.
Okay. And then how does that affect the intent analysis? So you have the house on, I think it's 93.
Yes.
And then you have the driveway that spills over onto 97, is it?
Yes.
And so I guess my question is, how does that affect the intent analysis, if that's the analysis that we have to follow here?
I don't think it affects it at all, because, the fact that somebody allows you because it might be easier to access the property, and somebody says, I'm not using it right now for any other purpose, so it's perfectly acceptable for me to allow that, doesn't mean that the person is giving up their right to use that lot for building in the future. Accommodations can be made to change that on an as-needed basis.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but when somebody grants an easement, they retain control of that property, correct?
They don't maintain control, but they have the right to use it for the purpose granted in the easement. The underlying ownership and control of the property still is with the record property owner. I mean, I once owned a house that had a driveway over somebody else's. They got to use it, they just couldn't block my access.
Yeah, and I think what I was trying to get at is that when that easement was granted, that the section where the driveway is on 97, that was still under the ownership of the owners for 97, correct? Right. So they didn't transfer ownership to 93 or create a single lot. They granted the easement because they wanted to retain ownership of 97, correct? And the idea was keeping two separate lots, correct? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No further questions.
What are we, if this is approved?
Correct.
What are we looking at in the future? What are we trying to achieve?
There could be a house built on 97 Laterno, 97 Laterno, I'm so sorry. Mr. Laterno can build a house on 97 Northfield Road. And that, again, is a conforming lot under the zoning regulations.
Conforming once we approve this?
Once you say it doesn't have to be merged with 93, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then that begs the next question, which is what happens to 93?
Well, again, what we're simply trying to say is 93 was created prior to the adoption of zoning. It was created in the 40s. And it was created prior to zoning regulations, so it doesn't have the lot width that is currently required. It was created with 60 feet, although that map shows 45, it actually had 60 feet. And now it's got 78 feet approximately. Please don't hold me to the exact number, it's an approximation. And it was 700 feet deep, so it had more than enough square footage to meet the minimum 18,000 square feet. Prior to the 18 feet coming over, a variance was granted because it didn't have a full 18,000. Now that it's got that extra 15 feet, I suspect it is conforming as to lot size. So the only thing that would be non-conforming about 93 will be road frontage. Everything else about the lot is conforming and has an existing home. 97 is conforming to zoning as to lot width, lot size. So all we're trying to do is say, okay, 93 exists, has a house, we're going to let it continue because of how it was created prior to zoning and the state of Connecticut coming in and condemning. The family has done what it can to bring it into conformance by transferring 18 feet over. And now we have another lot, which if, under other circumstances, we could have just pulled a building permit on and built on without any trouble. It's only because of what happened with 93 being pre-zoning that we now have an issue of trying to make sure it doesn't merge.
I have a question for Amy. What's the planning office's stance on this? What's your opinion?
We could support this. The planning office position is and it's just this, with the regulation stating that it's the single ownership and the contiguous lots that are considered one merged lot. But again, as Attorney Malloy, we can support her argument that the intent was to utilize them as two separate lots and enable both 93 and 97 Northfield to have a dwelling perhaps on them.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of this application? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Eleanor Letourneau. I'm Dave's mom, and I live at 93 Northfield Road. And this takes a weight off my mind because then as my father had given the property to us as two separate properties, it makes a difference now that I know for sure that I do have a property of my own and that the property next door can be used as another building lot. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wish to speak against the application? Seeing none, I close the hearing and open it up to the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the application. Better use of both properties without altering the character of the neighborhood.
Second.
Motion to approve, Mr. Disjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek.
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Mr. Burney.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next application is 1636, 168 South Main Street.
Applicant seeks to replace and relocate existing deteriorating, legally non-conforming garage barn with a height of 25 feet in an R11 district, where relocation will allow structure to become compliant with applicable setbacks. Proposed structure, in addition to 25-foot height, is also significantly larger in area. The office has concerns regarding the use, need for 2 floors of accessory storage, where proposal also includes increase in area.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. You identify yourself and explain the application, please.
Sure. My name is Mike Terrell. I live at 168 South Main Street. I'm looking to replace and relocate the garage barn that I have on the property right now. It is non-conforming, legally non-conforming, and I'd like to move it to an area where it is conforming. The barn is in disrepair. I have a 100-year-old tree that's my neighbor's that is growing into part of the foundation. It's rolling on the other side of the barn, so it's getting to the point where structurally, you know, it's not good. I'm looking to use the barn as a garage and also a workshop. I own 2 houses in town, one on 515 Center Street, which I renovated. It was deemed unlivable when I got it. I like to keep the old character of these old houses because I think it represents Wallingford and what it used to be. When it comes to duplicating these things for these houses, you're using wood that is non-conforming or you can't buy at Home Depot. I like to use rough sawn lumber, mill it down. I like old school style of craftsmanship and so forth. And that barn is my workshop right now, but I don't have enough space right now. I have pictures here if you'd like to see. My garage workshop is on carts. Everything gets pulled out into my driveway when I have to work, or when I was renovating all these houses, you know, the inside of the house was my workshop.
Anything else?
No, that's...
You have a ballpark figure on how much bigger the new barn is going to be than the old barn square foot wise?
The old barn was 20 by 30, and I'm looking to just expand the width of that to 24 by 30.
Okay. Any other commissioners have questions for the applicant?
Thank you. So, are you planning on hooking up water or heat or anything like that to the new structure?
No.
Okay.
No, definitely electric.
And you wouldn't be running a business out of there per se? It's your personal workshop for your...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
You're going to build a traditional barn there?
Yes, I am. I'm part of Northford Timber Framers. So I took the class. Myself, my parents have been very involved in it. So the class is built on a bunch of people taking the class and then also master barn builders. They do it post and beam style like you used to, and it's a community style where you raise the barn just like they would have in the old days. And it's built like it was built, if not stronger.
You'll have folks from this class assisting you building the barn?
Yes, yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just had a quick question. As I'm looking at the map here, the current barn that you have there, I'll call it a barn, it's a garage barn, is within the setback area, correct? It's non-conforming because it's located within the side yard setback, correct?
Yes, it's touching my neighbor's yard.
And when you build the new barn, will the new barn also be within a setback area?
I think I'm allowed 5 feet from the back and the side, and I was going to do 16 feet from the back and 6 feet from the side.
Okay.
Closer to the Historical Society.
Okay, yeah, because I just had I saw here the 30 feet, and so the 30 feet, 24 feet, that's going to be the dimensions of it.
That's what I like to, make the dimensions of it.
Yep. All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Anyone in the audience wish to speak against the application or for the application? Nobody in the audience wishes to speak for or against the application. So close the public hearing and open it to the commission for...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the application. Better use of the property without altering the character of the neighborhood.
Motion to approve, Mr. Disjardins.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wolfer.
Yes to approve.
Mr. Ruzek.
Yes.
Mr. Rice.
Yes.
Mr. Burney.
Yes. You're all set.
Thank you very much.
New business before the commission. I have the schedule for next year here. Did everybody get it?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody is happy with it?
Well, I actually checked the dates on the calendar as well, because we have a track record of posting something and then we have to go back and change it. But the dates are all accurate, and all we have to do is vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Wolford. All in favor of approving the 2017 schedule, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Make a motion that we accept the zoning Board of Appeals minutes for Monday, October 17th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.